How can churches help people to heal from trauma? That's what I want to talk about in this video today. Over the past 3 videos in this series, I've offered you a brief introduction to trauma, its impact on you, and how to recover from it. In this final video, I want to offer my recommendations to churches on how they can help people who have experienced some kind of trauma. Now, I have to start by admitting that some churches have a tendency to be overly simplistic when it comes to trauma and mental health concerns in general. This might come from a lack of respect for secular mental health professionals, as well as what I call a sanctified laziness. And what I mean by sanctified laziness is that some church leaders justify their not learning more about mental health issues, saying that they have a strong faith in God to cure whatever ails us. They don't think they need to learn about mental health issues. They just need to point people to God for their healing, and that's good enough. Well, that's unfortunate because many people turn to church when they are hurting. And when churches don't understand trauma or mental health, they can end up adding to the pain of the seeker. So my goal in this short video is to simply raise an awareness of trauma in the church and offer a few ideas on how churches can help people who have experienced it. Now, before I get to my recommendations, I want to address some common misconceptions about trauma that might be present in a church. For example, one misconception is that trauma only happens to weak people, like they invite it into their life somehow. They think that if you were truly walking with God, bad things wouldn't happen to you. Another misconception is that trauma is a punishment from God. They say the trauma came as a judgment on a person's sin. Now, this is such an archaic teaching, but it still exists in some churches, being taught from the pulpit and embraced by believers. This belief is very shaming and can easily shut down the healing process if people think that they deserve the trauma. Other people think that only prayer or spiritual healing can help, meaning that people shouldn't seek out secular counselors or use medication. They fail to understand that God uses all kinds of helpers to address trauma, both inside and outside the church. Still, another misconception is a teaching that you should never talk about your past. That when you accept Jesus into your life, that the past doesn't have any impact on you anymore. But that's naive, right? It's important to look back in our lives at what went wrong so we can address it, correct it, and be free of the past as we move forward. I mean, that's what the healing process is. And the last misconception I'll mention is that trauma is something that people should just get over. When you see people struggling with trauma for years, it's easy to get impatient with them and tell them it's time to move on. But trauma is often more complex than we realize. So we have to give people the space they need to heal on their own timeline. So those are some misconceptions that you should be aware of. I'd be interested for you to share other misconceptions you're aware of with me in the comments to this video. Next, I want to make some recommendations so your church will be prepared to help people who have experienced trauma in some way. First, the leadership should be informed about trauma. You can do that by watching videos like this and reading books on trauma to familiarize yourself with it. A lot of people have appreciated the books The Body Keeps the Score or the book Suffering in the Heart of God. Those are good places to start, and I'll put links to those books in the notes below. You might also want to watch my video series on trauma. This is part 4 of it, to give you a brief overview. Second, this may seem obvious, but it's important to create a safe and welcoming environment so people don't feel like they have to walk around your church with their guard up and a fake smile on their face. A church should present itself as a place of hope and healing, and not a place where rules and rituals are the main priority. This is something that needs to be built into your culture. God is a God of resurrection, and so that kind of overwhelming hope should be a part of a church's DNA. Third, it's important to be patient with trauma survivors. There's no quick fix. Sometimes pastors offer a one-size-fits-all solution to problems, like read your Bible, pray more, attend a small group, and everything's going to get better. I mean, we got to stop thinking like that. This attitude can re-traumatize people, making things worse for them. Fourth, know your limitations to help people. Sometimes churches and pastors feel like they have to have all the answers. But if no one has been trained in mental health, counseling, or trauma issues, then don't try to fake it by counseling outside of your depth. Be a good listener. Help people to identify their pain, but then refer out to trained professionals. Fifth, create a space where people feel comfortable sharing their experiences by offering support groups to address issues like grief or divorce or addiction. And sixth, be respectful of people's boundaries. What I mean is, be careful not to push people to talk about their trauma if they aren't ready to do that. Their hurt is sacred space, and you don't have any right to be in that space unless you're invited into it. And along those lines, encourage people to engage in the church when they feel comfortable. Don't assume that just getting them involved at church is going to help them. It might not be what they need at that moment in time. And finally, learn how to use trauma-sensitive and trauma-informed language. Trauma-informed language is a way to speak to people that shows you respect their experience. You want to understand their pain, and you want to help them, not fix them or judge them. It's a language that respects people's boundaries and avoids triggering or re-traumatizing them by being insensitive to their pain. Let me give you examples of trauma-sensitive language. First, use person-first language. This means referring to people as people who have experienced trauma rather than referring to them as trauma victims or survivors. It might seem insignificant, but you want to avoid stigmatizing people and reducing them to being merely victims. Their trauma is only one aspect of their identity, and it doesn't define them. Second, be specific about the type of trauma someone has experienced. For example, if someone was raped, don't refer to it as merely a sexual assault. You don't want to minimize their experience. That can be very demeaning and offensive to them. Next, be sensitive to triggers. Some words or phrases can be triggering for people who have experienced trauma. If you're unsure whether a word or phrase is triggering, it's best to avoid it or ask the person what words they prefer that you would use. See, by using trauma-informed language, you can help to create a safe and supportive environment for people, which can make a big difference in their healing process. Well, I hope this helps point you and your church in the right direction toward helping people who have experienced trauma. Wouldn't it be great if people saw your church as the safest, most supportive place to find healing? I think that's what church should be all about. Before you go, I'd like to recommend my book, Healing the Hurts of Your Past. It will help you to understand the source of many mental health issues and offers a process of healing from a biblical perspective. It's available on Amazon.com and in many forms. If you found this video helpful, please share it online. Click the link or the like button and leave a comment or a question for me. Check out my other videos related to healing the hurts of your past on my YouTube channel. And to learn more about all my books and coaching opportunities, you can go to readingremy.com. Hey, thanks so much for watching. I'm glad to have you with me, and I hope you'll look for more of my videos in the future. Bye-bye.